You said that the Russians are giving arms to the separatists.
Absolutely.
100%.
100%.
Ambassador Geoff Pyatt,
Yep.
thank you for joining us on Vice News.
Happy to do it. Great to see you, Simon.
Good to see you again. A lot of Ukrainians are complaining that America isn't doing enough to support it in its fight with Russia because the Ukrainians claim, the government claims, that Russia is behind the separatists in eastern Ukraine. What is America doing to help Ukraine, which has declared itself to be a Western ally?
Two things. I mean, first of all, President Obama has been very clear that the only people who should be able to choose where this country goes over the long term are the Ukrainians themselves. I'm not sure that everybody in Moscow has gotten the memo on that. It's very clear to us that the Russians continue to abet the instability in the Donbass, including by sending across fighters, tanks, heavy artillery, rockets, all these weapon systems. We have worked very hard to try to stop that. We've done so through our sanctions policy. We've done so by working very closely with our European partners. But ultimately, there's not going to be a military solution to this confrontation. What's going to solve this over the long term is Ukraine becoming a healthy, economically transparent democracy anchored in European institutions. And we're working as hard as we can to help to advance that effort.
The Russian government claims that it doesn't control or support the rebel movement in eastern Ukraine and that it doesn't have any ties to it and that this is a civil war scenario that's happening in Ukraine. What is the information that the American government has? Are these Russian troops in eastern Ukraine? Are these Russian weapons being supplied with the knowledge of the Russian government?
These are certainly Russian weapons, and there's no way that tanks and heavy artillery are moving across the border without the acquiescence and knowledge of Russian authorities. On the question of who these fighters are, a lot of them, of course, are Russian citizens. You have DNR, Donetsk People's Republic recruitment offices now in Moscow. It's very clear that a lot of the leadership of these organizations are Russian citizens. They make no secret of that. Of course, there are local sympathizers as well. Whether there are regular Russian army troops on the ground, as the Ukrainian government now believes, we just don't know. But in some ways it doesn't matter, because what's very clear is that Russia has been fueling the instability. This is a part of Ukraine which has long suffered from economic backwardness. That problem is something that has to be dealt with, and Poroshenko and his team have made very clear that it's a priority.
Do you think Russia is trying to make an effort to bring the violence down to a lower level in eastern Ukraine?
We have seen no evidence at all of Russia pulling back its support, seeking to de-escalate the situation. To the contrary, the information war continues, the inflamed rhetoric continues, this outrageous story that Russia Today was running about ethnic cleansing. The flow of arms continues, in many ways more egregiously than before. You have the downing of the AN-26, which happened on Monday, which the Ukrainians are convinced was done by a Russian surface-to-air missile, and I haven't seen any other good explanation for what brought that plane down. So we certainly have seen no throttling back of Russia's destabilizing activities.
You've got access to American intelligence that I could never dream of seeing.
Which I can't talk to you about.
But can you tell me how likely a Russian invasion is? Official Russian invasion with tanks and flags and Russian soldiers coming into eastern Ukraine?
I'll tell you, Simon, I have no idea, and I have totally sworn off making any predictions about Russian tactical moves, precisely because nobody saw Crimea coming. So I really can't predict. What I do know is that to the extent Russia persists in this pattern of intervention, destabilizing activities, violation of Ukrainian sovereignty, we've seen this movie before. So I think we have to be very careful not to fall into the same trap. What we're going to focus on is not Russian words, but Russian behavior. Russia's commitments, including in Berlin, in Normandy, in Geneva, to help stabilize the border, to help support the process of normalizing and stabilizing the situation in eastern Ukraine.
So Russia's actually intensifying the instability in eastern Ukraine. What's the United States going to do about it?
Well, we're going to work with our international partners to raise the cost for Russia. Russia's aggression has had a significant cost already. I've seen estimates of $50 billion in capital flight since the invasion of Crimea. The IMF has talked about Russian economic growth declining to pretty much zero. There has been a significant cost which has been paid for the Russian leadership's, and I want to emphasize the Russian leadership's decision to engage in this pattern of aggression against Ukraine, against the Ukrainian people, against Ukraine's democratic government.
Just over a week ago, the rebels withdrew from Slavyansk, moved further south to Donetsk. A lot of towns suddenly were free of the separatist movement, and the Ukrainian military moved in. But the economy, the infrastructure there has been devastated by 3 months of conflict. Why aren't we seeing more international organizations on the ground there assisting the people in those devastated cities?
I think security has been the biggest concern, and the fact that it's a security crisis which is fed from outside. And so all of these regions that are in the target zone for tanks and mercenaries who are coming out of Russia, obviously organizations are concerned about putting their people in harm's way. But I agree with you. It's important for the combined international community to be engaged in the process of post-conflict reconstruction, to help the Ukrainian government with what President Poroshenko has made clear is going to be his priority on reconstruction, helping people to put their lives back together and restore a sense of normalcy, and to overcome something that your reporting has helped to document, which is this tremendous atmosphere of distrust that has been created by 3 months of violence and all of the information warfare, the propaganda that surrounded all of that.
You said that the Russians are giving arms to the separatists.
Absolutely.
100%.
100%.
Why isn't the United States giving the same kind of support to its ally, to the Ukrainian military?
Well, first of all, because this is a crisis that doesn't have an easy military solution. We completely support the Ukrainian government's requirement, desire to protect their territory, to defend their sovereignty. We have significantly increased our non-lethal military assistance. We've done $23 million in assistance so far this year. But that's not the most important element of our support to Ukraine. The most important thing that we can do with Ukraine is helping to make this country economically successful.
You're saying there's no military solution to the conflict in eastern Ukraine. Does that mean the Ukrainians can't win? They can't destroy all of the rebels and the rebel movement in eastern Ukraine?
What I mean by that is that as long as Putin continues this policy of destabilization, as long as there are training camps in Rostov, as long as tanks and heavy artillery are being shipped from Western Russia into eastern Ukraine, I don't think there's any way that Ukraine can prevail militarily against that. Ukraine can't change its geography. What it can change is its politics. What it can change is the terrible history of corruption here. And I think that this government, this president, this prime minister reflect the best chance that Ukraine has had to try to attack those problems and to build the kind of modern democracy that the Ukrainian people really deserve.
It was really good to see you. Thank you again for joining
Yeah.
us. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Happy to do it. It's great to see you.